Hello. I decided I'm gonna start recording stuff more, and I'm doing this event tonight where I'm gonna be doing some like teaching about. It's gonna be a dialectic and a Dialogos event, and I have gonna try to explain, how to do that practice to people, and I've been preparing like how I want to do that, and one of the pitfalls is I have too many things to say about it that if I just go in to start talking, I'm gonna say a lot of things that are interesting to me and that I want to talk about, but that are not necessarily relevant or at least helpful for teaching someone to do that practice for the first time. So I'm going to talk through it now to get hopefully most of it out of my system, and then I can say just the things that are valuable. But there's a lot of things. Um, I was just watching a video of Guy Sengstock talking to Ryan Duns, who's a Jesuit priest who's been doing a lot of writing on William Desmond, and Desmond's been really big for Guy lately and articulating this idea of the metaxu of the in-between and opening up a way of relating with the world that um to makes it more alive, that brings some more enchantment to life. Um, it's not exactly the language they use, but it's not relevant right now. That's shorthand. But Guy referenced this TED Talk that he's watched, and he's talked a lot about of a study of how children acquire language, and they did this experiment where they recorded everything going on in the house, like as the kid was, coming into that time of speaking, and this idea that when the parent recognizes the child, that is like the key moment in what facilitates language coming. And so the kid's trying to say water, and they're making all these sounds that are, wow, wow, whatever, whatever they're doing, things that aren't quite water, but they have a name. They're like, there's a thing that I keep hearing all these adults say when they give me this drink, and you can imagine the kid like, I keep trying to say it, and no one seems to understand what I'm saying. They're not saying all this, but that's probably something of the experiment experience they're having, and they're just trying, they're saying things that sound kind of like it. And at a certain point, the parent, in their attunement to the child, in their getting of the child's world, recognizes, like, oh, you're trying to say water, like water, the cold stuff that is good for you. And and in that moment of the parent recognizing, of seeing the child, the quality, like however they track how close the kid is to saying it, like the fidelity of their ability to say water ramps up significantly, and other language and stuff starts coming online. And so he's talking about this and this moment when the the child is recognized, and how that recognizing is key to our development, and and especially in our development of language. And we talk about the logos a lot, like this ancient sense of the word that captures not just the word, but language, but reason, but logic, but purpose, but form, and and well, how this is a very deep idea. And logos, which is half of, I'm talking about this Dialogos event, through logos or by logos, um, of this process of co-realizing the unfolding, emerging reality between us. And I've had different ways of talking about this before, of, a lot's going on in Dialogos, but seems to be that one of the like key essential pieces of what's happening in it is we're kind of standing on the edge of our understanding, not even just of our understanding, like really of our being. I'm hanging out where I am not fully yet, and I'm becoming. And it's through language, it's through the articulation of something that I'm kind of grasping for, which isn't quite tangible yet, but there's something I'm feeling into that's almost here, and someone else is listening to me in such a way that they're being really generous with their listening. They're not trying to find where what I'm saying doesn't make sense or or to argue or debate or give their own idea about it. They're listening for the intelligibility that isn't quite intelligible yet, but that I'm groping for. And that moment where I'm trying to articulate something that I don't quite have a handle on, and the other person goes like, "It sounds like you're kind of saying this. Am I getting that right?" I go, "Yeah, yeah. Oh my God. Like that's the thing that I've been hoping someone would get forever." And there's an energy and an aliveness and there's a sense just in how exciting it is that it really, really matters that you get what I'm saying right now. And all of my favorite conversations have this quality of certain friends of mine that I've been talking with lately, groping around certain ideas. And there's just a shared ecstasy in, oh, you're seeing what I'm seeing. We're grokking the same reality that, you know, I've been feeling the edges of for a while, but it doesn't seem like anyone else is talking about it, or if they are, they're also kind of feeling the edges, and there's a center, a point where whatever is getting talked about is crystallized. And it's in that process of hanging around those edges and co-seeing each other doing that that actually is what does the crystallizing. And it's it's so consequential because it's not just like I'm getting a new idea, like a new concept. Like that's a piece of it, but it's so much more important to that because there could be, a sense of philosophical, linguistic masturbation where I'm just trying to say interesting things to be interesting. But there's a sense that in it where it's like something really matters about articulating it. And, as I'm feeling into it right now, it's like what matters is that if I can put my finger on it, that if we can talk about it and it be shared and intelligible and even given a local habitation and a name, to quote some Shakespeare. Um, if it can be given a local habitation and a name, it's like a new like reality shifts because now there's an object, there's a being that was like it already existed, but it wasn't realized. We weren't aware of it, and it didn't have. There's a certain intangibility to it that had it not be real, that if I just started spouting off a bunch of stuff that I could probably give an example. I'm going to keep talking abstractly for now because that's where I find myself. Um, if I keep talking about something and like the consequences of something, but it isn't named, I'm going to sound crazy. People aren't going to take me seriously because it isn't real yet. Like it isn't real for people because I can't wrap my head around it. I can't I can't comprehend it. But once it gets named, once a finger gets put on it, a whole arena of action and agency becomes real. Like I'll give an example because I'm gonna float off into space if I don't. But like, just to give one that everyone knows, like this idea of global warming. It's like, and whatever whatever baggage around that term you have, it's like it's neither here nor there. Like there was a moment where this concept that was, wasn't like it wasn't happening before we named it, but now because it's named, because someone took all these disparate events like, sea levels, ozone, all whatever goes into global warming. Someone took all of that stuff and said, boom, this is this. And now it's like, now it's in our government and in our lawmaking and in schools and how we frame what we do with our plastic water bottles and how we should feel about cows farting and what that means for how we live and are you a good or bad person? It's like the consequences of that getting named. And again, whether you agree with that was a good thing to happen or not, or how it was done was executed well, it doesn't matter. Like the fact that the naming of it actually altered the way we interact with the world in profound ways. That naming process changes everything. And so, some of the areas that I've been having these conversations around, some of the things, some of the edges I've been groping at, looking to name them, have to do with, there's been this whole really interesting uh debate controversy pop up in the Christian Substack community. So Substack, like the blogging platform, and people are writing about Christian Hermeticism. I think it was Sam Morello wrote a book recently that sparked a lot of stuff, and like, are you a heretic or are you not, or are you a, whatever. People have all their opinions about it, but this conversation of, oh, like there's like these Hermetic traditions kind of rooted in Neoplatonism and can kind of get wrapped up with occultism and also like Druid and animist kind of stuff, like a kind of European paganism, and certain Christians like, you know, wanting to embrace that, wanting to kind of find a way to bring that into the Christian worldview, and other people being like, no, like the worldview is fine. Why are you just, inviting heresy for no reason? Or maybe they can kind of see a reason that you think you would, but it's not worth it because now we're invoking magic and all this stuff that's problematic. Um, and people are, wrestling with these problems. And I don't have a word for like the like the intersection of why it feels so relevant to have that conversation. But most of the really good talks and dialogos I've gotten to with friends lately have been around like there seems to be something in our culture we're working out. Again, here's me groping. I can point to a bunch of unrelated things or maybe tangentially related things, but there's a there's a point right in the middle of them that I want to put a word on at some point. Um, I want to let a word arise for at some point, or maybe a couple words. It's like the relationship between the masculine and the feminine, kind of a lot of the stuff that we're working out in the culture war, but also at like philosophical levels. This metaxu, that's a really good word that Desmond's really grabbed onto, that's seeming to have some weight to it, of the in-between, um, of like unity and otherness, like kind of how identity works, and then this whole thing of, you know, the kind of monadic Trinitarian Christian world trying to grapple with kind of a more animist, pagan, like, no, the world right here is enchanted. And it's not just because it is like an icon for God. Like it's not just that I can see through the trees and the birds and the clouds, and that invites me to know the one, though that is important. But it's like also that the things in themselves are valuable, but also that but we're not doing paganism, we're not worshiping nature spirits, but there's something of that way of relating to the world that is there's a yearning for reclaiming that in a real embodied, tangible, kind of anti-Gnostic perspective where I can live in the world in a way that I'm invited into people like this phrase of like thin spots, like where the veil gets lifted and I kind of start to see through things. And and re-enchantment is a word that again is kind of thrown around here, and some people like it and some people don't. Some people don't like the re-enchantment. Like, no, it never stopped being enchanted. We just gotta see it. And working out the metaphysics and ontology of this, and this two minds of it that I really feel allegiance to both. One is like, when I get to the pearly gates, God isn't overly concerned with if my metaphysics were 100% correct. He's much more worried about, how I lived, how I what I am, right? And so there's that, like, kind of discounting the metaphysics and like, no, just hop in the soup of it. Like, just start being in the world and letting it impact you and seeing in this way. But then there is also the need to ground it in a metaphysics, ontology, and epistemology that justify that. But justify. It's like I'm not doing it just for justification's sake. Because, this is where we get into a lot of the postmodern critique of like, I'm not, we can play language games for power reasons indefinitely. Seems like that's one thing that we're really good at as humans is what can I do with language so me and maybe me and my group, but ultimately me, um, are doing better than everyone else. How can I use language in a way to do that? And and there's something about the way that this conversation is trying to engage with metaphysics that and really ontology, like being, like what is being, what's up with being, what is it to be, and having an integrated way of doing that where the articulation of the ontology both is like logically stable but poetically inviting. It's like if reading your book on ontology gives me a mental framework but doesn't put me in the world that this ontology proclaims is witness to, then it's not the thing. It's like understanding the ontological frame needs to both have me understand it and experience it and be it. And going back to the Dialogos, like the sense of, oh, I'm talking about a thing, but the words coming out of my mouth are secondary to the way I'm talking about it actually exemplifying exemplifying it. And like even just there, like as I name that, like I become aware of the ways that I am exemplifying it by how I'm talking and the ways that I'm still kind of trapped in my head and not fully in it. And bringing that to language starts to shift my perspective to where I'm speaking out of my experience and like from it and into it as opposed to just explaining things. And that shift where I'm speaking from and out of and into my experience in a way that kind of feeds back on itself. And that's what I'm doing right now. The fact that that's what I'm doing is just as, if not maybe way more important than the framework that I'm positing. Because it at a certain level, it's like not even a framework. It is a way. It is a kind of being and showing up and kind of getting my hands dirty, getting in the thing and showing it by participating in it and being it that is the articulation way more than just the words. And to put the transcript of this video in a language model and summarize it and, do all that stuff, like it could probably, do a great job summarizing this and like, understanding, doesn't understand exactly, but like it could even draw out implications of what I'm saying. It could do all that. But there's the deeper human thing because, this whole AI conversation and is just language manipulation, like the thing humans do. It's like, like no, like language manipulation is awesome in that it it Rumi says, sell your cleverness and buy bewilderment. It's like I'm using all my cleverness and all my ideas to in exchanging it, expending it, yeah. Like I'm expending my cleverness and language skills in such a way that actually brings me into the place where they start to be inadequate and I can find myself bewildered and on the edge of a thing that I'm not understanding yet and hanging out there and just letting that keep moving me. And it is all of that moving. It is the spirit that is moving me right now, and what's that which motivates me to speak and click record and make this whole video happen. It's that energy, that spirit that is the thing articulated way more than any of the words. And the words are valuable only as much as you, my listener, can maybe start to tap into the spirit and and do it a little bit and like kind of hop in that and like from this listen yourself from the spirit that I'm hoping to grok, or not even grok, hoping and doing in my best and endeavoring to imbibe and imbibe it to imbue it. Maybe it's a cool phrase that I might want to remember after this. Like I imbibe a way such that I can imbue the language with that way, and it can have something of a transmission quality. I don't love that word, but it's cool. It's a good one. Um, yeah, and and that comes back to this kind of grappling of the re-enchantment and the Christian pagan conversation, the masculine feminine conversation, and this whole sense of revalorizing the feminine, but doing it not in a, you know, not coming up with a systematic ontology or like not fixing her, not locking her down, because it seems like once we do that, she's masculine again, and we totally lost the track of the thing we're wanting to happen. And and the tricky thing with all of this is it really has to be in human relationship that these transmissions occur. Because at the end of the day, if we're just hanging out in logical proposition argumentation space, you can come up with a million arguments, against what I'm saying or the ways I'm talking about it and the frames and you know, power dynamics and that's all there. And if you just hang out with the language, all those ways to kind of deconstruct and undermine the point I'm making are totally valid within argumentative world. But there's an undeniability to the spirit, and I can't. There's there's no way that I could convince you through argumentation and logic of the validity of this spirit. I could give a bunch of arguments for it. I could give a bunch of logical reasons why, and I think that's a valuable thing to do, and that's definitely a good gesturing towards it, a pretty potent way of doing that pointing. But at the end of the day, if you don't have a sense of it yourself, if you don't know it from the inside, as it were, and 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 hear the inside in me from the inside in you, then it's not going to come across. There's a certain openness to that and an internal knowing that can allow that. Yeah. So I kind of find myself on the edge of it now and empty, as it were. Like like empty, even of definitely knowing where I want to go from here. But even there can be there's a self-forgetting in that when I hit record, I had some intention of wanting to get through something, but I'm not even kind of with why I wanted to do this video at the beginning because I've talked myself into and kind of dialogos my way through the frame that justified making the video, and now I'm in a kind of different space. And 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 there can be like a fear in that a little bit, like, oh, I need to go back and remember, like I need to justify myself, I need to justify creating this and being here. And and trying to let that go and just be in whatever's here and follow the deeper thing that I'm listening to that's beyond whatever reason I could have had for making this video. Or maybe it's the deeper reason that I didn't know. Mm. Yeah, well, if you made it all the way through, I hope you got something out of this. If if you did, awesome. I'm curious what it was. And if you didn't, it still feels valuable because even just where I've found myself now, like, is slightly heightened and ecstatic, in beyond myself, outside of myself kind of sense that I value being in, and I feel totally um separate from any reasons. Like I can give you all sorts of ideas about, well, it's why it's valued to be here, but like the state itself actually doesn't require that. Like it doesn't. It feels self-justifying. It feels self. Um, it's blessed by itself. Like I don't need the blessing of justification from within this space. It it is and matters and persists of its own accord. So thank you for helping me get into it by your listening ears that exist already for me, even though they have not yet listened.